Hi there. Welcome to Infinite Stories. This is the podcast where we sit down and interview everyday people just like you and me. This is your host, Mitchell Vine, and boy, do we have an incredible story for you. Let's jump into this week's interview. Well, then, I would love to just ask you for an introduction. Who are you, and why are you here?
Well, I'm almost 60-year-old grandma. I have 3 lovely adult children and 4 lovely grandchildren. I have worked in medical profession for most of my life, but I've also been an entrepreneur and I've owned several businesses. One of them is a 32-year-old janitorial service, which the Lord provided to us when we were desperate for income so I could stay home and take care of my kids. Mm-hmm. And just recently, in the last few years, I felt like the Lord was calling me home to start telling redemption stories about the way He has intervened in our lives over the course of the last 4 decades as a married couple, and then all the many things that He did before and after that. We've dealt with infertility, adoption. We are an interracial family. We've dealt with a lot of drug abuse in our family, in our home, a lot of alcoholism, and just drama in general. And a few years ago, the Lord said, okay, it's time to start telling your story. And I came home and said, okay, where do I start? Because when you're not a natural born writer or author, you come home and go, okay, what do we want to write about? And you grab your pen and your paper and you go, now what? You have no idea. You have no idea where to start. I spent about a year and a half kind of floundering. And then the Lord just said, I want you to show them, meaning others, where I have shown myself to you the most. And it was in my ability to forgive those who had hurt me. And it was it made such a traumatic impact on me that it was, the minute I started to tell that story, it just sort of flowed. And it's been flowing ever since for about a year and a half. So I have become an author. I've written 2 Bible studies, one regarding more abandonment for children who become adults without at least one parent, and sometimes with neither parent. And then I've written one that walks women through the ability to forgive those who have perpetrated abuse against them. So now I'm an author, speaker, writer, talker, podcaster.
Wear a lot of hats.
I do. And my husband would say, no, it's not hats that you're wearing. It's plates that you're juggling.
That's a good one.
And he's actually pretty much on top of that. He knows. Yeah. So.
Well, that's awesome. Well, you shared a lot about yourself, but you didn't even share your name. So who are you?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought that was a given. My name is Lisa Schafer. I'm a podcaster. I do the Chronicles of the Christian Drama Queen podcast on several platforms. And it's just a place for us to share redemption stories and other forms of encouragement. And I kind of set it up as a hot mess granny, and I talk to others about being hot mess grannies and moms. And so homeschooled for 25 years, so I share a little bit about our drama there and the way God worked through that. So
awesome.
I should include my name next time, probably.
Next time,
in
maybe
the bio.
Just to be aware of.
I don't know.
I mean,
it's on
not
the list.
Everybody can see your little name like I can, because some of them will be listening. So.
I know. It's a checklist I'm not following. That's what it is.
Yes. No, that is totally fine. Well, from one storyteller to another, you already asked the question, like, where do you start the story? And I like to start the very beginning. What are some of your earliest memories growing up? What was it like for you?
I was raised by my mother primarily after 18 months of age. My father was a country music guitar player, drummer, singer. He was evidently very talented, but he also was just your typical country philandering, drug abusing, alcoholic country music star. And so he left us when I was very small, and my mom was my mother and my father both for all my life. There were some abuse things that happened when I was younger, and that's primarily what I write about in the Christian Victim's Guide to Forgiving the Unforgivable. Because as a child, if you remember those events, they just kind of linger. You just carry them with you. But my mom did her very, very best. She was just extremely naive about the world around her. You know, she'd never been exposed to anything ugly. And so when ugly things began to happen to me, she was shocked. She didn't know. She wasn't prepared. And I blame my mother at none, zip. It was none of anything that ever happened to me was my mother's fault. She did her very, very best with what she had. And so, but we moved around a lot because she was a single parent. Back then there were no, you weren't forced to pay child support back then. It was the 60s. It was a very long time ago. And so she never had any kind of child support. The government didn't force him to pay any child support. So she took every job she could get. And if she got a promotion, we moved. And so before I was 9 years old, I know I lived in about 9 different places. And by the time I was 14, we were up to 12 different places. And finally, my mom put the kibosh on that. She said, I'm not moving anymore. Kids are in high school and middle school, and we're just going to stop. And so we lived in a small southeast Kansas town until I went to college and met my husband. And so, but we just had we just lacked some security. It was not, I never knew when we were going to go again. And it's kind of bled into my adulthood. I tend to be a little nomadic. Since my husband and I have been married for almost 40 years, we have moved about 15 times. And a lot of that has been just because I was restless, so we'd be 2 or 3 years in a place and I'd get restless. Let's go somewhere else. God's really dealt with that with me. And so for the last 11 years, we've been in the same place. So, 12 years. It's a record. We've been in the same place for 12. I know. Ugh.
Man, I'm envious. I've also moved many, 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 many times in my short life up until this point. I think, man, I've definitely moved multiple states. And I think even in 2020, I moved like 5 times, I think. Yeah. Something like that. So I know what that is.
Was it nomadic? So I'm going to interview you. Was it because you feel like you're nomadic, or is it because you had other opportunities and it was worth the move?
A mixture of nomadic nature, but then also running away from problems, trying to get away from family, and then sometimes even getting to the point where you mentioned that restlessness. Yes. Oh yeah, definitely restlessness. I typically would move every 3 years or so, give or take. And so whenever that third year was coming up, I would just like start to shake and be like, oh, well, this is typically the point where everybody would leave me. So I should probably just leave at this point. So,
and you know what? I think sometimes there's like a security in your insecurity. It's like in the adventure and the ability for you to control the opportunity to make an adventure. There's something about that, and I think that for me, I really had to spend some time with the Lord about that. It seemed like something was not. I was never settled, and I do now, looking back, especially now that I've spent some time writing about it, and God's kind of, dumped the story out onto paper. I'm realizing that there's some cycles of behavior that I adopted. My mom did too. We moved because it meant better things. Every time we moved, it meant better things. And so I kind of, when I get too settled where I'm at, I think I must need to move for a better thing, So, yeah.
Yeah, whenever I start to get comfortable, like, oh, no, something must be wrong if I'm comfortable.
Need to change that. Need to change that.
No, absolutely. Well, kind of going back to near the beginning of your story to kind of lay more of a setting up for you, or I guess for the listeners overall, but as your childhood was kind of forming out a little bit, were there any other events or any other relationships that you might have had with different friends or different people that kind of shaped your character a little bit as a kid?
Well, one of the things that I picked up on when I finally got alone and home and was writing was that a great many of my decisions were formed by the beliefs that I had about who I was as a discarded daughter. And they included things like never feeling wanted or never feeling loved or cherished or protected. I don't know that my father ever could have made a difference and protected me from the abuse I suffered as a child, but who knows? And so there's that thinking, well, if he'd have been around, maybe this never would have happened to me. I had a lot of, and of course my behaviors kind of, I started looking for love in all the wrong places at a very young age. And I was trying to fill a hole in my heart that my father should have filled, and that I think God wanted to fill with even himself in the absence of my own biological father. So yeah, I had relationships that were, bad, several. By the time I was 14 or 15 years of age, my innocence was lost. I mean, my innocence was lost at a I was 5. And so there was nothing to, you don't, we kind of, and adults do this, and it doesn't matter who they are. Once the petals have been plucked, you kind of start passing them out. You think there's no big deal. And that's exactly what I did as I became a teenager. So all my relationships were very, very fragile, and none of them were very positive. Even my own husband, I got married when I was 20. And even that relationship was dysfunctional the first few years. We really struggled. So I don't, I know you want to hear stories, man. I got them.
Anything you're willing to share?
Yeah. I can remember both of the stepfathers that I had after when my mother finally got remarried. The first one was when I was 5. And I remember being extremely needy as a 5-year-old. And I tell the story in my study about neediness. I actually went to him at age 5. We're all in my grandmother's house. They just announced their engagement. And I had it in my head that I needed to ask him if he would be my daddy. And so at 5 years of age, I crawled up on his lap, and there's all of this, if I to set the stage a little bit, there's smoke rising in the room because everybody back then smoked. It was the 60s, right? And everybody's drinking. There's beer cans and tea glasses and cups of these big glass coasters sitting on every coffee table and side table. And I just wormed my way up onto his lap. And he was a naval officer, and he was a big guy. And I just felt like this deep drive to ask him if he would be my father. And so I very quietly whispered to him, "Walter, would you be my daddy?" And he barely heard me. And of course, then he says very loudly, "What?" So the whole room turns to look at me, and I'm like, well, there's okay.
I tried.
So much for being quiet. And I just kind of yelled it a little louder. I said, can I call you daddy? And he said, "Well, I guess you sure can." And even at 5 years of age, I realized what a big deal that was for a little abandoned girl to be able to go, okay, now I got a mom and a dad. And I cherished that. I was my brother and I were the only cousins that didn't have a father at all of our family gatherings. And I just really, really cherished that. And and for some reason, this memory is huge to me, and my mother doesn't remember it at all. So it's interesting to me how much of an impact it made on me. And for her, it was just, she doesn't recall it. But it was such an emotional moment for me. And sadly, within just a few months, he was abusing me. And so there was a lot of disappointment. I can remember many times expecting men to come through for me. Walter was the first, and then it would be the next man that my mom trusted. She got married a second time when I was 15 after I begged her not to. But she always felt like she needed to give us a father. It was the time, back then there were not a lot of single moms doing it all on their own. She was a bit of a unicorn. And so for her to raise kids alone, but she felt like we were missing this fatherly figure in our lives. Now, my grandfather was an amazing man. My mom's dad, who I also always called Dad because she always called him Dad. I didn't know any different. Even clear up till he passed. He was the only positive father figure I ever had in my life. And so there was just one disappointment after another when it came to men. And it just followed me. And a lot of that was just because I kept choosing poorly, and so did my mom. We just didn't choose well. And we thought we had to have it. We thought we had to have that filling. in our soul. And it wasn't until I was probably 15 years of age that she and I and my brother became Christians, and we all went forward in church, and we all got baptized together. And so it was a family affair for sure. And so that just it kind of changed our perspective. But it never really changed. It really didn't change what I thought I needed. I mean, I didn't. Just because you become a believer doesn't mean you become a follower. I was not a follower. I was just a believer. And so I did a lot of, started to medicate my pain with alcohol and a lot of drugs. And it wasn't, I was probably, 6 years of being high almost the entire time. Now, I was also a very good actor, singer, performing artist. And so nobody knew I was high for 6 years. But because I could pass. I mean, I was junior Miss First Runner Up, and I was high as a kite. so evidently, I had it. I was able to hide my my drug abuse and my alcohol abuse, but it just, the guilt just began to grow and grow and grow in my life, and I think that's what kind of began the decades-long journey of figuring out that God really is the father to the fatherless, and I needed to deal with all of that unwanted and unloved feeling. And so that's what I started writing about. So
I love that. I love that.
Well, it was when he says to you, I want you to tell them where you've seen me the biggest. The ability to forgive all of the pain that came with all of those bad choices, and even some of those things that were perpetrated against me that were not my choice. I think people are surprised that he can provide that kind of healing. And most of the women that I talk to now about this topic, in fact, I just, interestingly enough, just came from a weekend that it's all about forgiveness. We spent an entire, 24 to 36 hours talking about letting people go, and even, even trying to find the ability to love people that are very hard to love. But God wants that for us. And so the journeys that I write about in my book, my Bible studies so far have been, how do we get there biblically? I mean, what does the Bible say about feeling unloved and unwanted and uncherished? What does it say about all of that? You just have to battle those lies with the truth. So...
I love that. I love that. Well, then, as you were transitioning from the high school era into the young adult life, how did life change for you? What events kind of shaped your character even more?
Well, my husband and I got married in 1985. Now, this is a really good story, and we just commemorated this event on October 1st, because here it is, the 7th or 8th.
Yep.
So on October 1st, my husband, who was very young, he was only 20 years old at the time, he was transferred from a small fast food chain restaurant in his small town of Independence, Kansas, to my small town of Chanute, Kansas. And the very first full day of work that he had, I went in to order with a friend of mine from college. She was my dorm mate, or roommate. I guess we call them roommates now. And she and I went, I don't know. I'm not very politically correct either, so here we go. So we went in to eat, and I saw him kind of flitting around the counter. He's like, but he's like the assistant manager, and he's moving and running back and forth. And he took our order, and I just kept watching him. And I went and sat down with her, and we ate, and I still kept watching him. And later on that evening, we had bunk beds in our dorm. And she was on top, and I was laying down below, and I said, Leah, that guy that we saw today at Hardee's, and of course she was working there. That's why we went. We got a discount, an employee discount. And she said, you mean the new guy, Larry? And I said, yeah, that assistant manager, Larry. And she said, what about him? I said, this is really weird. I think I'm going to marry him. And she said, you don't even know his last name. I said, I know. And it's not like I'm in love with him because I don't even know him, but it's a weird feeling. I just think I'm going to marry him. Well, I didn't go out with him for 4 months. We just we saw each other, and it's a small town, but so I saw him frequently at different places. And finally, February something, I think it was the 5th of February, he remembers. He remembers this stuff.
That's good.
I asked him out to a movie that I had actually already seen the night before, but I didn't tell him that. with another guy, but I didn't tell him that. And so I said, "Hey, there's this new movie. We should go see it." It was a terrible movie. It was Nightmare on Elm Street. It was Johnny Depp's first movie. It was horrible. And that was our first date, and I've been with him day in and day out ever since for almost 40 years. So, what basically happened was, I felt like the Lord just said to me, "That's the guy. Just wait. That's the guy." And so I did. I just waited until an open opportunity, and I said, "Okay, it's been 4 months. Let's see if this happens." And I invited him to a movie, and we've been together ever since. So he had absolutely no. And if you listen to him when I tell this story, he's like, "I had no idea that you liked me at all. Had no idea." He's like trying to hook up with other people I was in school with, and I just kept watching, looking around, and I thought, time's going to come. Time's going to come. Time's going to come. And it did. So.
That's hilarious. How often do you think God does that for people?
I sometimes think if we're listening, he would do it more often. But I think that, and I have heard I think other people are surprised at how I knew I was going to marry him, but I didn't know anything about him. It wasn't like I had, I had been on dates where I thought, oh man, this is the guy. I'm madly in love, right? Had a high school boyfriend that was, talk about dysfunction. It was one of the most dysfunctional affairs ever. And I think that if I had been listening to God say, wait, because there's somebody coming, I would have saved myself a lot of grief and a lot of pain. It still impacts me today. I still have, I have twinges of darkness from sacrificing so much of my morality and certainly my purity, but more than that, relying upon someone that was so abusive. And it wasn't his fault. I mean, when I look back, I think, he was just a regular teenage boy who, his hormones were in charge. I mean, that was just the way it was. And I think he loved me as much as he could, but he had his own dysfunction, and God wasn't in the middle of any of that. So we struggled and battled and broke up a lot, ruined relationships with lots of other people. Because he began to date friends of mine, and those friends of mine stopped being friends of mine. And I mean, just lots of dysfunctional stuff. I always encourage people now in high school, don't date. It's like practicing divorce. Don't do it. Don't date. Go out in groups. You can be yourself. You're not on the spot. There's no pressure to perform. Go out on dates in groups. Have a good time. And when you really feel like you're ready to wed, just wait and watch, because God will bring another ready-to-wed spouse option into your life if you'll do that. And I've seen it happen in families that are committed to waiting, especially when we homeschooled for 25 years. We met lots of families that were teaching their kids to wait. And I know, so I've seen it. But, for us at the time, waiting was not the option. It was, I had to fill that void. I desperately needed to fill that daddy void. And it just followed me. Every decision I made was kind of based on that for a long, long time. So.
Man, so then after marriage, then how did life move forward? What were some pivotal moments in your life that have brought you to where you are today?
Well, there are a couple. I'm actually podcasting this month on when God doesn't deliver, when our plans are not his plans. And so there were several things that happened right after we got married. First of all, I've always felt like God was calling me back. And so after Larry and I got married, we spent quite a few years battling, this new relationship that was not grounded in faith. Even though he had experienced a redemption when he was younger, and so had I, neither of us knew what walking with the Lord meant. We didn't know what that meant. And so he has his own He has his own painful story, losing his father to suicide when he was very young. Lots of dysfunctional alcohol and drug abuse in his family. So we were two really broken people. And so we spent a few years in small town southeast Kansas, and then my great-grandfather passed away in Wichita. And when he did, my husband and I realized there was no real future for us in the small town, so we came to the big city for funeral events, and my husband asked my grandmother, because this was her father who had passed, if he could look for work on the day of the funeral. He said, it's a Saturday. I probably can find some places to apply. And then Lisa and I can we can move into the city where you guys are. Well, of course, my grandmother was thrilled with that idea. Mm-hmm. And so we went to the funeral, and he went and looked for work, and he got hired that day. So 2 weeks later, we were moved from small town to big city. And that was God's provision for us, because we started going to a small little Baptist church not too far from where my grandmother lived. And we were there 16 years, growing and learning and dealing with our stuff. We battled several years of infertility while we were members there. I remember, and one of the things I counsel women, I say counsel, I mean mentor, because you can't use the word counsel. It's not politically correct if you're not a counselor. So, but I have mentored many women through that process of infertility and understanding that God's plans might be bigger and greater than you think, and to be patient about that. But it's a part of a woman's identity is being able to bear children. It just is. And I'm not anti-working woman or any of that. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur. I've been self-employed for 30 some years. But I do think that there's a part of each woman who cannot give birth, that they mourn that loss of ability to have children. And so we went through several years of infertility, and there were 3 or 4 families in the church that were also dealing with that. And one by one, they all got pregnant. And the way that was always announced was in church on some Sunday morning or Sunday night. Pastor would ask for prayer requests or praises, and they would drop the bomb that they were expecting. Now, I was never not happy for them. But when you're the infertile woman in the church, all eyes turn to see how you're going to respond. And it was, talk about a magnifying glass moment. I had to put on a very happy face and be very excited for them, which I was. But there was a little piece of my heart that was just broken. And realizing it wasn't me again. It wasn't me again. 3 or 4 families get pregnant more than once that had also been struggling with infertility, and I never did. And one of the saddest things that people can say to a woman who's struggling with that is, "You're next. You're next. It's coming. You're next." And they're trying to be encouraging and cheerleadering and all that. But don't tell an infertile woman that she's next. It's too heartbreaking when it doesn't happen. And it didn't for me. I've never borne children, but I have a strong background in adoption laws in the state of Kansas. Now that we've done it a few times, and each of those children has powerful stories about how they were spared long enough to get adopted into a family. We adopted all 3 of them at birth. We are an interracial family. I have children who are mixed race and African American, and I'm Caucasian, and so is my husband, although he's also part Cherokee, Native American. So going through the hard spots of being the one that didn't get pregnant, and now that I'm on the other side of that, and I can see what God can put together through adoption, we are His adopted children. So, and if you look at Scripture, it's a long support line of adopted babies in Scripture. So I was able to I was able to see my infertility eventually as God giving us that was a means to an end, because we have redemption stories through all of our children because of our inability to give birth. So, but it took years to see that. It took a decade and a half before I began to really see that that's what he was doing. So, so there was that. I was like I said, I'm doing a podcast right now about when my plans don't go through. I started a cleaning business when my son was born because I wanted to be home with him. We did not know how we were going to come up with an $1,100 income, which is what I was making working for a bank in Wichita, but we knew we wanted to be home. So my husband and I made the decision when the baby was born, I'm just going to go in and give notice. And we don't know where the money's coming from. We don't know how we're going to make it work, but it was a step of faith. So I went in on a Friday and I said, you've got 30 days to replace me. I was a senior customer service representative. I said, you've got 30 days to replace me, and I'm going home. And that Sunday, we told everybody at church, pray for us, because we have no idea what we're doing. It was like, hey, we need $1,100 every month. And I think it was $1,102 that we needed every month for us to make ends meet. And so we tell everybody we're going to fast and pray, and we're going to, let the Lord provide. And I'll be honest with you, that step of faith was barely a step of faith. I mean, it was like, I believe he can, but I don't know that he will. I was like, I know he can, but I just don't know that he will. So I start thinking things like, I'm going to sell Tupperware, or I'm going to sell makeup. I'm going to find this, entrepreneur spirit. My husband goes to work on Monday morning, and I get a phone call at like 7:15. He's only been there like 15 minutes. He calls me and he says, are you sitting down? And I said, okay, I'll sit down. I'm not, but I will. He says, you're not going to believe this. He said, this woman came up to me that I work with, and she's been talking to me for months and months about how her cleaning business is just a drain. She's exhausted, and they're having to clean and work these clients. She just came to me today, had no idea that we were looking for another income, and asked me if I wanted to take over her cleaning business. I said, wait a minute, does that mean we have to buy it? He said, yeah. She said, just give her $100 every couple of months to pay. And, after a year, we'll have the business paid for. I said, well, good grief, how much money does it make? Now, remember, I need $1,102. And he said, she makes $1,104 a month from this cleaning business. And that business is now 32 years old and is in six figures every year. So God used that, and that was the first time I can remember I got off the phone with him, and of course we're both crying, right? I get off the phone with him, and that verse in Scripture that talks about praying with utterances and groans that we don't understand. We're praying in the Spirit. I had no idea what to say to the Lord. I was so grateful for this outpouring and obvious blessing our faith and belief. I had no idea how to pray. It was just the most amazing experience where I just said, okay, Lord, I have no idea what to say to you. I had seen him in a completely different way. He became my provider in a whole new way. And so, but man, I love telling that story, because I think so many times people think God can't provide. I just need $500 more to get the car payment made, or I can't get the utilities paid, or I can't get, and anymore economically, things are just a struggle. And I think if God doesn't fulfill your faith with this outpouring of cash, he can certainly fulfill your faith, and you know this, by making you more creative, because he is the creator, and he can give you that ability to create a way, right, to get by. So I love telling that story, because that was the first time I realized what a provider he was, and how much he wanted me to have the desire of my heart, which, I had prayed for this baby for years. And then he came, and I was taking him to daycare every day. I was like, I'm taking him to daycare every day. I hate this. And I probably could have thrived in that job, and I would have probably been a great mom working full time and taking care of him. But I really wanted to be home, and God provided a way. He gave us the desires of our heart. I didn't even know it was a desire of my heart at the time, but he made it so. So So our walk of faith just kind of gradually kept moving forward. And I tell, there's Paul talks about this feeding babies, baby Christians on the milk of the word because they're not ready for meat. And I talk a great deal in my studies about some pretty meaty things, about understanding where God is when you're in the midst of your abuse and your pain, about how he not only looks at you, but how he also looks at your perpetrator, at your abuser. And those are some deep, meaty kinds of concepts. And I love God's timing because if I had tried to do something like this 20 years ago, I'm not sure I could have worked through and resolved some of those issues and been in a place in my relationship with the Lord where I could have talked about those meaty things and been able to explain some of those things, because the more you know him, the closer you get to him, the more he reveals himself to you in those areas that are kind of hard. They're just kind of tough. So we started homeschooling when Christopher was 6. We adopted a baby. So here was this baby boy adopted in 92. And then we had a little girl that was a surprise. We happened to have when you adopt, you also lose children. You don't always get children, you lose children. So 6 times we had tried to adopt children. We lost a total of 4 babies. 2 of them were actually toddlers. We actually were fostering them from time to time in our home. Their mother had lied to us about her situation, and one day their father just showed up at my door and took them away. So we lost those girls, and that was when we went, okay, we're not trying anymore. Well, that was the first experience we'd ever had. You have to keep trying. It was like, we're not done. We've got to keep trying. So we lost those girls, and then Christopher came along, and that adoption went through. We lost another baby just a couple of years later. And it was a woman in the military. She was going to officers training school, and she thought that would be best. She couldn't sign the paperwork. And she came to me on Valentine's Day and said, I can't sign that paperwork. And months went by. 4 months went by. I already had the baby's room set up, and so we just shut the door and left it. Finally decided on a Saturday we're going to tear down all the baby stuff and put it all in the garage. And we turned that room into our room. It'd be closer to our son. And Sunday, the next day, got a call from the attorney saying, there's a baby that's been left at the hospital, and you guys already have a home study completed, which is what you have to have in Kansas before you can adopt. You already have a home study completed and on file. You're the only ones that will take a biracial baby that's got a completed home study. Do you want this little girl? You talk to Lisa, because I wasn't on the phone with my husband at the time, and he's like, oh yeah, she's going to want her. And he said, well, you go talk to her. He said, oh no, she's going to want her. And he was right. He knew me pretty well. And that's when our baby girl Megan came home on that next Monday, and she was a surprise. We weren't planning. We thought we were okay. We were just going to stop. We had Chris. We just put all the baby stuff away in the attic, in the garage, and now we had to bring it all back down. My husband was thrilled. We had to bring it all back down. And so that's when Megan was born. And then, 4 years later, we were approached by another attorney in town who got our name from our attorney. And she had a woman working for her in work release who was just about ready to pop. And she had shown that woman back then, I don't know if they still do it this way now, but we had a big photo album in our attorney's office, and social worker would show it to women interested in looking for a couple. And this woman had seen us and our kids, and the 2 kids we already had, and just pictures of me doing a garage sale and the house that we lived in and the big pool in the backyard and some, fun stuff, vacation pictures and stuff. And she picked us. And so we met with her, and it's one of the most interesting stories of probably all of my life as a parent, is the relationship that I had with her. She's African American, and she picked a white couple. And our relationship, I was very honest with her, and she was very honest with me. it's just fascinating to me that she would want us. Why she wouldn't? She said the same thing that I've said several times. Like I said, God told me I was going to marry my husband. I don't know why. I don't know. She said when she saw my picture in the book, in the photo album, she said, "That's his mother," and she said, "I can't explain it. I just knew that you were his mother," and that's how Caleb came to live with us. And he's 26. He's gonna be 26 this month. It's crazy. Because I'm not old enough to have a 26-year-old, as anyone watching the video can surely see, right? But or a 32-year-old for that matter. So our adoption stories are huge, and walking through the pain of losing babies and the joy of getting placement, getting babies placed in our home, such strange ends of the same roller coaster. And but man, when you look at the losses, when hindsight's 2020, when you look at how you lost placements and lost babies, it's hard to see that God's got a better plan for you. But the last placement that we lost was on the 28th of January, and 9 months to the day, my youngest son was born on the 28th of October. So even at the time when we were losing a placement, we were in the hospital and walked out empty-handed, helped deliver that baby. We mourned that loss, and it is just like a death, because you're bringing a baby home and then you don't, and but then 9 months to the day later, our CJ was born. And, now I can look, once you get to one place, you can look back and go, aha, that's what was going on back there. So he was probably being conceived at the time that we were suffering loss, right? And God had a plan for him down the road. And now he's my baby. He's my 26-year-old baby. So, but if people try to look a little bit at their own story, they can find a lot of, for me as a Christian, it's always God moments. For other people, it might just be aha moments. But for me as a believer, it's like, oh, there's a God. Okay, God's right there. I saw that, and that's and I love that. That's encouragement for people that aren't seeing their God moment yet. They're not seeing it yet. They need to know it's coming. So
that's really good.
And then, of course, like I said, we homeschooled for 25 years. And, honey, that's a whole nother podcast.
I know. I was homeschooled my whole life, so I completely know that is a whole
whole nother story. But I will tell you this about the homeschooling. And I do tell other homeschool moms the same thing. I spent a great deal of time trying to be a square peg in a round hole in the homeschool community. I was not, and God forgive me, I was not a jumper person. I was not someone who wore the denim dress and the sneakers I wasn't. I was the homeschool mom that went to homeschool conventions to look for books and curriculum and whatnot with other homeschool families. I was the one with the spiky red hair and the David Bowie T-shirt. I was not. And someone explained this to me not too long ago. God creates some of us with a too muchness personality, and it's a line from the Alice in Wonderland books.
Yes, it is. Yep.
Yeah,
and sounding familiar.
Yeah, and there's this conversation from the caterpillar about being too muchness, and I have that personality, and I've spent a lot of years trying to be the type of Christian woman that was very meek and mild-mannered and never spoke up and tried to be a better listener. And not that those are bad things, but as I've gotten older and I've watched what God's been doing through now the ministry of facilitating forgiveness through other women, I can't tell that message without being too muchness. And it's the part of my personality that I used to try really hard to squelch, and be more like the really sweet, lovable homeschool moms in my groups. I mean, I was president of the homeschool group, and I was nothing. I mean, I was trying really hard to be something. I just wasn't cut to be a cookie cutter. I wasn't that person, and I think that there's a little bit of a stigma against too much personality in the corporate church sometimes. Like, women are encouraged to all be very in line. Does that make sense? And I'm not saying that anybody's doing that on purpose necessarily, but I do think that in some denominations we seem to promote the idea that good Christian women look like this. And we attach a lot of these personality traits that are just impossible for someone that God's called to be too muchness in a lot of settings. And so I really battled that during most all of the years I was homeschooling. It wasn't until the last 5 or so years, 25 years I homeschooled, but probably the last 5 or 6 of those years, I was purposely authentic in my homeschool surroundings. When I was with other families, when I was with other moms, we went through drug abuse with our kids and stuff when they, they had their own abandonment to deal with, and they started self-medicating when they were very young. So we dealt with some of that, and most of our homeschool counterparts were not dealing with that. They didn't know what to do with us. They didn't know what to do with us. And we were we felt ostracized. Now, whether or not they were purposely ostracizing us or we just felt so different, struggling with those issues, I don't know. I can't really answer for other people and the way they maybe came across to me. But I do know that my personality probably didn't get us invited to a whole lot of shindigs that we could have.
You're one of those.
I was one of those. So like,
my mom told me about people like
right.
you.
I was the person. I'm the mom your mother warned you about. I know for a fact that I was at a convention one time. I was at a homeschool convention one time, and the night before I went, I got a haircut and I colored my hair. It was an inch long all over and spiked. And I loved that look. I was hey, haven't even told the story about having a garage band in the 80s and being a little rock star. Haven't even told that story.
Man, so many nuggets.
I know. I've got all kinds of stuff. But I went to this homeschool convention in my black, I don't know, gypsy style dress and spiked hair, and I saw a friend of mine, and she had another gal with her. She was actually selling a book at the book fair, at the curriculum fair. And I saw her, but she didn't see me. But I did hear the woman lean into her and say, "Look at that hair." And she was talking about me as I was walking by. So my friend turns around and looks at me and goes, "Oh, it's you." And, we hug and blah, 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 blah. And that woman was just mortified that she had said something about my hair. Because, of course, this gal and I were friends, right? But I realized, I bet that's how most of them looked at me. But it was very freeing for me, because I felt like a failure as a homeschool mom that couldn't conform to what everybody expected the homeschool moms to look like. I just couldn't do it. And it wasn't just the fashion stuff. It was the way I educated. I did not educate with textbooks. Most of the education that my kids received, they received through discussion, sometimes in movies. And we spent a lot of time talking about some things that are foundational, but they weren't in the we didn't use textbooks to get there. We used a lot more creative ways to do it. And so, my littlest, my daughter, when she was 4, she wasn't doing phonetics at the time. She wasn't learning how to read phonetically at the time, like all of our homeschool counterpart 4-year-old kids were doing, but she could tell you more about the Great Wall of China than just about anybody else in the room. So we were different. We were different. We were very different. And so now I spend some time telling other moms it's okay to not be. God created us all to be very different, and these dogmas about being just looking a certain way and always having hair in a bun and always wearing this, and I don't know. I mean, I'm not talking about modesty. That's a whole different issue. But what I'm talking about is the desire to be what God created you to be when the church is kind of stuffing you into their own mold. And I'm pretty defiant about that. I mean, because I've lived it and I realized it, so.
I love that. I love that. You kind of talked back at the beginning of the story. I think you said about 15 or so that you had the salvation moment that people in Christian circles typically talk about. But you also said that it took years to shape your perspective of what it looked like to actually walk with Jesus. How does walking with Jesus and walking out that redemption story, how does that play out in your life today?
Well, I'll tell you something. You can't get to know somebody that you never visit. You can't get to know God if you don't visit with God. And the way that he makes himself known to us is through his word, by his spirit, and in the lives of other believers. And so I know that when it comes to how my relationship has grown with him, it's grown through struggle. It's grown through seeing him as a redemptive father who has my best interest at heart in his word and in revealing himself to me in our lives, in our situations. It's relationship. And I think that we, as we get closer and closer to the end of days, I think that God is kind of raising up his people to walk by the Spirit he's given us, to give us counsel and peace and help us interpret the word that he has for us in his word. And a lot of us we're very entertained by our Christianity sometimes. And I'm not big on that. Now, I'm a singer, so don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I sing for the glory. When I sing for the glory of God. It's never about entertainment. It's about worship. And so, but you have to be very real with the things that you are dealing with in your humanity in order for you to walk rightly with God, if that makes sense, because he already knows what's going on. You're not hiding anything from him. And so to be able to have conversations with him that include, I know you know this, Lord. I'm really struggling with this bitterness. I know you know this. I can't stop eating because I'm trying to use it to comfort myself, and I need you to comfort me. Or, Lord, I know you know I'm drinking so much because I've got this pain I can't get rid of. You cannot deal with that stuff if you're not authentic with him. So I try to encourage people just to be very genuine in your relationship with the Lord. And guess what? With other people. Because they need to know they're not the only ones struggling. It's very sad to me what I've seen happen over the course of the last 2 or 3 decades in corporate church settings. We've become what I've seen, and of course I'm not going to every church, right? So, but what I see is a lot of tradition that's not encouraging people to deal with their pain and their suffering and their sin. If we just are quiet about it, it will go away. In my introduction to the discarded book, Reclaiming Freedom and Forgiving the Father Who Left Her Behind, I talk about how the church doesn't want to talk about this. We don't want to talk about men that don't take care of their kids, and we certainly don't want to talk about the abuse that goes on with our children. It's too painful to think about, and it's certainly painful to think that it might be Christian men perpetrating that kind of stuff. But if we don't talk about it, the church is doing a huge disservice to the victims that are trying to deal with those things because they feel like the church is sweeping it under the rug and doesn't want to deal with it. Last statistic I saw, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, The last statistic I saw said 4 out of 5, I think it was 4 out of 5 men in the church, meaning church members, Christian church men, deal with addictions to pornography. Now, that is a huge, massive number of people. And it might not be that they're in it as much as they're tempted by it, and they don't get to talk about it. Women are the same way. We're not talking about our temptations to each other. It's just not allowed. And I think we're doing a disservice to people by not being authentic about the struggles that we have in the church. Because then other people don't think they can come because they're not clean enough yet. And the truth is, he's not the physician to the unsick. So, I think that the walk with God is about authenticity, in all things, not just in your conversations with Him, but probably in your relationships with other people. And I've had to, we've dealt with a lot, like I said, with drugs and alcohol and stuff like that, and never adultery. That's never entered into our marriage. But we've dealt with other things. And if we were not honest about them, I'm not sure that we could have walked through them, because you got to address them. You can't address them if you're not authentic. So,
yeah,
I'm not sure that answers your question. I hope so.
I'm pretty sure it did.
Somewhere in
and
there.
Even if that didn't answer it, some of the follow-ups to it will kind of wrap it up a little nicer. But one of my favorite characters in a lot of stories are the mentors and the guides. And I was kind of curious if, looking into your story or looking back at your story, are there any mentors or guides that have kind of helped you get to where you are today?
Oh, my. Okay. I don't know how much time you've got, but hey, I'll tell you.
I'm on your time.
You're on my time. He's on my time. I like it. Okay, so I didn't realize I wanted to be a singer until a teacher told me I could sing. And she, in my 9th grade year, came to me and said, listen, I want you to come in after school. I want to show you something. And she brought some sort of fancy Latin aria for me to look at. She says, I want you to go to state competition with this. We're going to sing. You're going to get a 1. And you're going to, she was like really building me up. She was a very dramatic person. She was a too muchness kind of teacher, right? And that kind of was I was very standoffish. It was like a 1980. I'm very standoffish of this, right? Because she's just so much. She was very dramatic. And it turned out that it was the best relationship I ever had regarding my music and performing arts career, because from that I did dinner theater and community theater and like I said, Junior Miss Pageant and all of that stuff. I even recorded some stuff back in the 90s. But she passed away the very year that she invaded my life. She had a heart attack while she was driving and wrecked her car. She ended up in a creek. It was dramatic. It was like the most tragic thing that had ever happened to me up to that point, because I had such a love for her and she'd pulled out of me so much that I didn't know was there. And I went through a couple of years of significant anger toward God for taking her away. But she awoke within me something that I did not know existed, and it was a love for music. And then the Lord brought another music teacher into my life. Her name was Barb Watson. She was a Christian, and she taught me about deep South gospel music from the black church where she was raised. And man, it just fueled my spirit. I mean, we went to church with her and performed even. She was another mentor, but she was able to take the love of music and the love of God and show me what that would look like. And so that was a huge mentoring thing for me. She also has passed. I'm sure she and Jody are both talking about me now, right? In glory. They're spending their time talking, right? They're like, oh, look at her down there talking about us. So those were huge, interestingly enough, those were both teachers, and they made a huge impact on my life. Our pastor, who told me when I was 26, and I came to him and said, I think I want to teach people teach young women about, dealing with impurity and all of that sort of thing. He actually said to me, I don't think you're ready. And he's right. I would have I was not ready. And now it's, 20 some years later, I'm finally ready. But he was a great Bible teacher. He never worried about stepping on toes. He just did it. And it forced us to deal with our stuff. He was always very authentic. He was always very real to us about his own frailties. And that was important too. So he was my pastor. He's still my pastor. He doesn't preach at the churches I attend, but I always look him up at the church he's at because he's an associate now, because he retired. And so I still watch his sermons on Sunday nights, and he's still teaching me, and loved the word, and he knew the word, loved the word, and preached the word. And that was his calling, to know it, love it, and preach it. And that's what he did. And so that was he was a fantastic mentor. And so was his wife, who was one of those homeschool moms that I always strive to look like and be like, right? She really was. She was authentically that way, right? And but she was always very good and encouraging to me as I was struggling with things. I struggled as a church goer. I struggled with modesty in the church. I didn't understand the need to protect the eyes of the men in our congregation. And she very gently walked me through some of that. And when I failed at it and knew I had failed at it, and God just brought this burden upon me to deal with that, she was the first one to forgive me and say, it's okay. You know what? We're all going to walk through this with you. It's okay. And people would say, oh, well, what's the big deal about that? Well, it was a conviction in my heart. I'd been a harlot before, see? And I kept wanting to bring my harlot fashion into the church. And so dealing with that, she was very good as far as women supporting me in the church. She was really great for that.
It's amazing.
And then when we began to have trouble with our kids, when they were teenagers, we were not going to that church anymore. That church was a small church and it had shut down and disbanded. And we had moved to the country to try and provide some safety for our kids from the big city. And they began to struggle. And I was working really closely with the publisher and editor of the curriculum that we were using. Steve and Jane Lambert Jane wrote 5 in a Row, which is a tremendous homeschool curriculum for kids before they hit age 12. And then she's got some other curriculum for that. But he kind of replaced my pastor. And I went to him when we were struggling with the kids, especially my oldest. And he said, listen, and I've never forgotten this. He taught me 2 things. Comparison is the death of contentment. You can't look at other people and wonder why you don't look like them or do like them. And number 2, you are responsible for the way that you raise your children to God. But they are responsible to Him for how they turn out. And that was freeing, because we were trying so hard to correct and cajole and maneuver and manipulate and love and encourage and fix, and it wasn't working. And he said, you have to do your best before God and what He's called you to do, but they're ultimately responsible for what they do before God. And you have to let that go. That's something that you can't control. So, and he's been a huge supportive influence on my life ever since. My grandfather was the only real dad I ever knew, and he always treated me like one of his own. He was the kind of granddad to tell you when you did something wrong to go out and find a green switch to get spanked with, and then while you were out there, he'd forget. And then when I became an adult, years later, I'd come in, visit him and my grandmother real quick, just make sure things were good. They were probably in their late 60s, early 70s, I don't know. And I'd go in and just make sure they'd eaten and they were drinking enough water and all of that stuff. And Dad would just reach into his back pocket and grab his wallet and open it up, hand me a 20. He was just he was just, and I'd say, I'm okay, Dad, I don't need that. And he'd be like, well, you're going to need it. You probably need gas. He was just that way. And he would have done anything for his family. And oddly enough, he was probably one of the only good fatherly influences on my husband as well, because he didn't have a lot of good influences. So Granddad was huge. I have some recent mentors that are putting into my life regularly, especially when it comes to starting the ministry of facilitating freedom for people. Jeremy Reyes has been a tremendous, with Purpose Beyond Profit, been a tremendous mentor, just keeping me focused on the purpose of what I'm doing and not the profit of what I'm doing. And that's huge and so different from what you see in the world right now. And there are a couple of editors who have written things before me that have really helped kind of forge some of my ideas into storytelling. Of course, I've got, and I know as soon as I get off of here, I'm going to think of somebody else, right? Right? I'm going to,
totally fine.
Right? It'll happen. Okay. I'll get off of here and there'll be somebody I should have mentioned them, right?
That's fine. It's fine. But that goes right into the follow-up question then, with how all those mentors and guides modeled living for you. Do you find yourself doing that same exact thing for other people?
It wasn't until I got older that I realized that it was time for me to be a Naomi to Ruth's. And I did have to go back in my mind and remember the way other people had encouraged me and start applying some of that. I've been to two, excuse me. I've been to two retreats recently with women, and most of them much younger than me, and have realized that you have to be really sensitive to what God's doing in someone else's life and how he wants you to input for them, whatever it is that you have, whatever wisdom you have. I know that for me, and this is not a boastful thing. In fact, my pastor friend Steve Lambert told me not too long ago, the Bible study stuff is great. Your books are great, but your gift is talking. And when God encourages you to open your mouth, you need to do it because he knows what he's doing, because you have the gift of speech. And I don't know that like I said, for many, many years, I thought I was just too much. My personality was just too much. And really what he has just encouraged me to realize is that I'm not too much for God to use. I might be too much for people to hear sometimes, but if I am sensitive to what the Spirit of God is telling me in a situation where someone has need, then I need to, and I'm also one of those people that I'm very fortunate in that when I, study the Word of God, I retain it. And he's very good at reminding me of what he's written to other people in a situation that I get to counsel in. So, for example, when someone is hurting, I had a woman this last weekend who was hurting, and she was dealing with some unforgiveness towards some family members. And the Lord just brought all kinds of scripture to mind while I was talking to her. And that's just him. But if I had not been willing to say to her, can I talk to you about this? Can we talk? Is it okay for me to talk to you about this? And just him give me the right questions to ask and the right words to speak to her. But I do have to go back in my mind and find the mentors I've had and the ways that they have reached out to me that were effective, and reminded me of who's in charge and how much I'm loved and what God can do with all of that. So yeah, I think you kind of have to tap into what you know. And of course, I'm old enough. I've got a lot back there to know.
Take it from all those filing cabinets. I understand.
Got a lot of stuff back there. So
that's awesome.
But yeah, I think you have to. But man, that's just about being. We got to be clay on the wheel, because if we just kind of strike out and decide we're going to be an ashtray, and God's like, no, I want you to be a vessel for water. That you got to let him mold that, and sometimes it's all a bunch of cracks in the pots and whatnot that need to be fixed. But he uses it. I love that book. I can't remember who wrote that book. It was Barb Johnson. She wrote this book, God Uses Cracked Pots. And man, am I. So
I love that. I love that. Well, I've got a lighthearted question for you. Are you more a book person or a movie person, if you only have one for the rest of your life?
Oh, this is so hard. I'll tell you what, I love to read, but I never get to read. I very rarely get time to read, which breaks my heart. Because, and I know you and I talked about this in the past, my block planner looks like a rainbow of all kinds of different colors of different things that are going on in my life. But I do love books. And that was just born out of a love for teaching my kids. I did not have that before. And now I love the way that God gives us an imagination that can develop a scene from the page that's far better than anything you could see in a movie. I love that, having that gift, that God-given gift of imagination. And I think we're kind of stealing that from our kids to a great extent because, now we've got books on, books on screen and everything's narrated, and we have I think we're kind of stealing some good stuff by being so screen dependent. But yes, I just recently, if you looked on the other side of my desk, you would see a bookshelf full of books.
Good.
Because I do love them. I just had to make a place to spiral bind my Bible studies back here. Otherwise, my shelves would go clear across the back of that wall. So I do love books. But I love movies too. I mean, but when it comes to my kids, we love and we love talking about character development in movies. My son and I mean, people would be probably a little bit turned off by some of the movies and the characters in movies that my oldest son and I especially talk about, because I always try to work God into the story of what we're watching. What kind of redeeming value does that character from The Watchmen have? Well, he ain't got any. So let's talk about that. So we do watch some stuff, but Lord of the Rings movies, when those movies came out, we picked them apart because we had read all the books, right? So we went through all of those movies going, oh no, that's not right, or actually they did that one pretty good. That talk was pretty good. And we do, and I, in every story, in almost every story, not every single one, but I can't think of one that isn't right now. There's a savior moment. There's somebody that's the hero in the epic tale, whatever movie or book it is. And I love being able to say that and point that out. And I say, that's not, God wrote the story, his history, his way, in a way that we could always see it evident even in the stories of other people or the stories of other writers. There's a savior moment. And so I think that may be why I like books so much and why I like movies quite a bit.
Quite a bit. Yeah. So they even each other out. Well, then let's lean on the book side of things and ask, if we were going to write a book about your life, what would you want it to be called?
Ooh. Well, there's already a book in the works about my life.
So do you have a title?
Yes, I do. It's called The Diary of a Christian Drama Queen.
Nice.
Yes.
I love it.
So it is in the works. Some of the stories are already in my Bible studies. So I'll just kind of extract some of those and enhance them a little bit. But some of the stories I haven't told. And a lot of that has to do, when you write a book, and I don't, have you written a book?
Like publish wise, no,
Yeah,
but
no?
I have written books before.
Okay,
yes.
So one of the things that when you're writing a memoir is to sit down and create a timeline. I was born here, and here we are today. And what happened in this decade, and then this decade. Of course, for you, it'd be like this decade, and I'm done. For me, it's like this decade, this decade, this decade, this decade, and this decade. What happened?
Yep.
And you sit down and you just kind of write your own story on Post-its to an extent on the timeline. And then you develop a theme. And my theme has always been, I think, based on what I've seen, the need for rescue and the actual act of being rescued. There's been a lot of that time and time again in my life. And the drama queen, the part of that I consider drama queen, is the emotions that come from all that neediness and doubt and fear that you'll ever be rescued, and then all of that gratefulness, that thankfulness that you have once you've been rescued, Redemption is a powerful thing, and that's kind of the common thread through the diary of the Christian drama queen. So, so that's the working title. Now, something else might happen. I might change my mind.
We'll see. We'll see. I was picturing like actual like journal entries of like the date, the time, and the year and stuff as the chapters.
Yep.
That'd be really cool.
It would be. It actually would have, and there, that's like the diary of the wimpy kid, and dear God, this is Anna or whatever. So it's similar kind of
Margaret,
concept. Margaret, this is Margaret. But as I look at the time, I'm reaching back here because I've got the timeline written down in a notebook back here. But when I look at that, I didn't actually have a diary, but it's interesting that God prompts me to write kind of in that style when I and I had a college professor tell me one time I was actually doing actually had to do a term paper on legalities of Medicare, the legalities of Medicare, and as I was writing, and I wrote it from the perspective of somebody who needed it, and as I was writing it, it just came out as a story, as a memoir of somebody who needed, and what the laws had done with it, and how it could have been enhanced or changed or whatever. And she said nobody's ever done that. It's always been so dry. I didn't want to read it, But she said, you actually told me the story about somebody who needed it, and needed to understand the law about it, and I think that's just kind of what God does in my head, kind of writes it in that way. So I'm excited to get that. I self-published my Bible studies. I may look for a publisher for the diary of the Christian drama queen. I don't know yet.
Awesome.
I don't know yet.
Awesome. How often do you work on it?
Well, I have blocked out time to work on it about 8 hours a week.
All right. There you go.
I have that time blocked out. When I sacrifice something on the planner, and this is new to me, I struggle with this planner thing. Man, it's a nightmare. I put out everybody else's fire before I fuel my own. And so when I have to move things around, I try to keep the writing time, or what I call the CDQS time, in there, all and sacrifice something else. Not my family, but sometimes it's things like meal planning. I'll sacrifice that so I can, if I had to push some stuff aside because of a fire I had to put out. So,
yep.
But yeah, and making things a priority. That's always one of the struggles with deciding to work in ministry at all, I think, especially for busy women, is we don't like to tell, for me, I don't like to tell people no. It's part of the Christian drama queen problem, and what I call discarded daughter syndrome. We so want the love of the people that we know already love us. We so want to maintain that relationship in a good place that we don't want to say no, and I address that too. So it's just there's a lot there, Christian drama queen stuff there, and I don't even know why we started with that, how I got started with that title. But I get more people that go, oh, that's just so great. That's just a great title. I have no idea where we got that. But that's the name of the website. It's the name of the podcast. I mean, it's so there you go. I
completely understand. The name of my business was based off of a joke in high school, so I completely understand.
Really? I love that.
Part of my homeschooling experience was my mom wanted me to start my own business, kind of, not really, but know what it looked like, because she has an entrepreneur spirit and I did not. So
I love her already.
Live out the success out within me, which didn't get very far. But in the business, I was like, well, Mom, I've got too many ideas for businesses. I could go this way, I could go this way, this. And I was like, man, I've got infinite ideas. Like, I don't know what to do with all these. And I was like, that's a really good name. I need to write that down.
So there you go.
And it worked.
And there you go.
God knew that I was going to need it many years down the road of when you're filling out the LLC paperwork. Like, oh, well, yeah, I guess this does.
It's good.
This adds up.
I like it.
Yeah. It does. It does. Well, then, kind of wrapping up the last few questions that I have, how would you encourage somebody who is scared or intimidated in sharing their story? What would you do to kind of challenge them or encourage them?
Leslie Leyland Fields wrote a book called Your Story Matters. And it actually is a book teaching other people how to write their story. But one of the things that she says in the very beginning of the book, she starts with the value of your own experiences and your stories in the lives of others. Don't write it for you. Obviously write it for you because you might need to go through some of your story and hash out things in your story. There's healing to be found there. And there's also encouragement and redemption to be found there for you. But there's a very good chance that the stories you're going to tell need to be told for other people. So it's kind of selfish for you not to tell your story, if you think about it. Don't have fear about that. Just be authentic. Make sure your perceptions, that the perceptions that you write down are yours. You know, the things that you saw or you felt at the time, those are yours. And understand that even if somebody else went through the same story you did, their perception may not be the same of that situation. Like I said, my mom doesn't remember my "Will you be my daddy" moment. She doesn't remember that story, but her perception is different. She came from it she sees it as a mother would see, and I was seeing from that 4-year-old, 5-year-old little girl. Other people may not see what you see, but that doesn't mean it's not your story, right? You have to be authentic to what you saw, felt, went through. Understand that it's valuable to others, not just to you, but to others. And it's kind of selfish to not share it and let God use it in whatever way he wills to minister to someone else. And the very last thing is this, because this has come up actually recently in my own life. When things in my ministry have not moved quickly, and I was like, Lord, why did I do it? It took me months to write this Bible study. It took me months to write the next one. It's taken me months to edit and fix and prime and prep and podcast and talk about these issues. And it seems like it's not really going very far. And what he says to me is, if what you're saying about me in your redemption stories leads one other person to find redemption in me, is that enough? And it is. It is enough, because there's that person's value to God is infinite, and we have to understand that the ministry part or the mission part is really not about us. It's about other people that God wants to reach through our story. So have no fear, if God uses your story and it just helps one person, then it's worth it. Then it's worth it. It's worth all the work that you go through. There's just no telling what God can do while you're telling your story, but look at what he can do with it afterward. It will be there long after you're gone. And there's
sticks.
No telling what he'll do with it then either.
That's the kind of the piece and the purpose of the podcast itself, because when I first started, I was kind of shaking my head. I was like, okay, God, I got to do all the marketing for the podcast and all these different things to make it successful. And God was just like, that's not the point here. You're capturing stories, and I will give them to the people that need to hear them.
Right.
That's my responsibility, not yours.
Yeah.
You're there to sit there, to listen, to record, and then you press another button, and then I will do the rest.
Exactly.
And that's given me such a comfort to think of, like, okay, I'll do that. I can do that. And as soon as that shift happened, I've had more podcast guests that I know what to do with, and it's been such a great experience to just sit, listen to stories, encourage people in their stories, and then also, like, without fail, every story that I've listened to, there has been at least one small aspect that I've experienced the same thing. Whether it was just down to the details of being homeschooled, or just down to the details of experiencing moving a lot. Every single story I've experienced, there's always been something. There's always something, and that's something I always want to encourage people, is like, as you're sharing your story, just know that whoever you're sharing it with, there's going to be something. There's going to be some clicking factor that they'll hear that and be like, oh, you experienced that too. well, there's just a whole nother level of depth that opened up between the two of us because we share that.
Your relationship is enhanced, and there's an intimacy that's created by shared experience.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, yeah, I love that. That's great. That's neat. I'm glad to hear that, because I've heard some of your podcasts, and I always go, oh, yeah, see, I can relate to that, right? And it's fascinating that you do that, too, with your guests. It's funny.
It's not a trick. It's just science.
No, it is, well, yeah, right. It's not science. And really, God, and isn't it interesting that God would use just your step of obedience to let people tell their story, to encourage you that you've not been alone in any of these little things, that you can connect with other people. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I like it.
Absolutely true. Well, I only have one last question then for you. Is there anything else that you sense the Holy Spirit wants you to share on behalf of anybody who be listening?
The ministry that I'm called to is to make sure people understand that God does not want them to be in bondage to the bitterness that they feel from pain. And what I experienced myself is that my pain gave me purpose. It was like, if I can hold on to the pain that I've been through and allow it to be a living, breathing motivator in my life, then it felt like there was a reason for it. And what God has said to me is, I want you to be freed from the bondage that bitterness has created. And the only way to do that is to know me better, to understand that while you were feeling unloved, I can prove to you that you are loved. And that while you were feeling unwanted or uncherished or unseen, I can show you where you were cherished and seen, and wanted. And so my message is to help women specifically, because I can't speak to men as much. Now, they can certainly go through the Christian Victim's Guide to Forgiving the Unforgivable, and the principles are the same. But for me personally, it's about being able to share with women that bondage is creating certain personality traits. It is creating probably some rage, and it is creating some dependence upon addictions, probably food or alcohol or medications. And in many cases, it's things like romance. It's an addiction to a dream that you cannot fulfill, or to relationships that are not healthy. And so I guess what my message, I feel like my purpose is to use my stories in whatever way they are, to show people they can be free from the bondage of bitterness, and that God not only wants them to have that freedom by forgiving their perpetrators or abusers, or in my case, my father who abandoned me, as well as my perpetrators, but that I can learn to love those people. It's a great big Holy Spirit God-filled thing, but it can happen. And the freedom that there is to be had in loving the way that God loves those of us who slap him in the face every day, that freedom is huge. And you can walk in it, and you can live with it, and the kind of peace and joy you can have from it is monumental. And most people don't think they can have it, but that's not true. You can. So I encourage people to, contact me through my website or listen to the podcast or whatever, and to find some freedom, because it's possible. And it's what God's best for us is to be freed from that.
For sure. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. It's been amazing to hear your story, Lisa.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Well, I've got a very silly way that I like to end the podcast, and it is with a high five with my guest. So I would ask that you pick a number between 1 and 10 for me, please, and then say it out loud.
5.
5. All right. So we're going to count down from 5, and then we're going to high five the camera to make it look like we're high fiving each other.
Okay,
right?
I'm ready.
Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. thank you so much for listening to this week's Infinite Story. If it resonated with you, send it to someone you think would be blessed by it. If you would like to share your story, please reach out to us at infiniteideas.studio. You never know how far the impact of your story can reach. Take care now.